Hey, welcome everybody. Episode 97 of Martinis with Scott, a show about winning momentum in life and in business. Thank you for joining me. And as my friends in the Nashville hockey talks tell me, holler and swaller. It's a good drink on a Thursday late afternoon. Well, first of all, I want to say congratulations to the Biden-Harris administration. And Biden is the president. This is the administration. We need to all sort of support America. And so regardless of where you sit on the Trump, never Trump, Biden, never Biden, if we have that yet, we need to wish them well for everybody's sake. So I want to congratulate the Biden-Harris administration, as I said, and truly wish them well. I want to congratulate all of you never Trumpers who have such a hatred for Trump and for the people that voted for Trump. Now you have to lay in the bed that you made, and how is that going to go? You can't just yell Trump anymore. You can't just yell Trump, right? You've got to lay in the bed that you made. You've got to you've selected Biden, and it seems to me like the never Trumpers are like the fellow that fell off a 10-story building. So he's falling down from the roof, and as he passes the 6th floor where the window is open, and some lady yells out to him, "Hey, how's it going?" And he replies, "So far so good." I think that's what the never Trumpers are going to experience with Biden. So far so good. But is it so far so good? I fear that things are going to go terribly wrong. I absolutely wish that they don't. I hope that they don't. I want to support the president. But let's talk about my priorities. By the way, Martinis with Scott is not a political show. In honor of the inauguration yesterday and the new administration, we're going to talk a little bit about Biden. We're going to talk a little bit about Trump. But we're going to try and draw a couple of lessons, I promise you. We're going to try and draw some lessons relevant to business, to your life, to decision making, to leadership. That's the point of the show, and that's what we're going to do. But because it's such a unique day or a unique week with the change of administration, I thought we'd have some fun talking on the political side, even though I'm almost certain that's going to get me deplatformed. We'll find out. So listen, this is the way I look at it. My priorities when I'm trying to evaluate a president, any president. And by the way, I sit here in Canada. I have a different set of priorities in Canada than I would when I'm running businesses and thinking with my U.S. political hat on, because they're different countries, obviously. But for the U.S., here are my priorities in evaluating the president. Less war, right? Less war. And on that front, I think Trump, objectively, did a really good job. He's the only president in a long, long time that has no new wars. People are just pinging me on Twitter, and it's distracting me, so I'm going to shut off that notification. Sorry for that. I've been tweeting yesterday and today about political things on Martinis with Scott on Twitter, if you want to look that up. It's been fun, but I try not to get distracted by it too much. So my priorities: less war, and objectively speaking, measurably, Trump did a great job on that, right? When we've had years, both Republican and Democrat, years of regime change, what I would think of as we're going to be treated as liberator type wars, when not one of those has ever worked out the way that was promised to the population. So now we have a new administration, we have Biden, and for a fact, we know there will be new wars coming, right? We don't have to guess this. We could just look at the last time Biden was in power, or any year that Biden's been in power for his long career. Where's that war going to be? Is it going to be Syria? I don't know, but we know that it's coming. So that's sad to me. It's a disappointment to me, but that was one of my priorities. Less war, less terrorism. Less terrorism, I think, is objective and measurable under Trump. That terrorist attacks, I don't know that they've completely stopped, but I don't recall one. I don't recall a significant terrorist attack. Is it a coincidence that in Iraq, on the day of inauguration, on Biden's inauguration, there's a suicide bomber that I see this morning. Estimates, fog of war, who the hell knows what's right, but I see has killed 25 people in the commercial center of Baghdad, I believe. And is it a coincidence that there hasn't been a terror attack in Iraq for close to 4 years? What is 4 years? Why is that a relevant number? Let's think about that. I think we all know the answer. Terrorism's back. Welcome to the Biden-Harris administration. So less war, less terrorism, more jobs. The dignity of a job for lower income people, and I shouldn't have to say this. I hate that I have to say this, but for people of all color, lower income people of all color, the dignity of a job. That was important to me. Is a priority to me. I think, objectively speaking, measurably, Trump did a great job on that. Jobs increased, particularly in the Midwest, in the heartland, particularly in manufacturing. And I know all you never Trumpers are going to go, no, Trump, bad man, orange man, bad. But they're all, and you're going to say, well, under Obama, we had job growth, and Biden never said manufacturing's dead, get over it. Okay, you can have your opinion on that, but whatever it is, maybe there was a great base when Trump stepped in, but you can't deny the objective, measurable fact that job growth was unheard of, no matter what color you were, and in the minority groups was record low unemployment for the U.S. ever. So he was doing a great job on that. How is Biden going to do? I don't think we need to even guess, right? Day one, he canceled the XL pipeline, which if you're a Canadian is kind of a big deal. Wiped out thousands of jobs and future jobs in that construction. What penalties are there going to be for that, by the way? You never see in that press release or in that announcement what the damages are to all the companies that have invested billions of dollars to get this thing going. Just as an aside, we know for a fact, we've already announced that Biden's going to eliminate a bunch of energy projects and energy jobs. So that's going to be a problem. We know there'll be a return to regulation. Everything that was done by executive order by Trump is going to be reversed, or already has in the first day of the Biden administration. Again, I'm not complaining about these things. The president has to have the freedom to make these sorts of decisions. I'm just saying we don't have to guess what's going to happen, because we already know. We've seen it before. What's going to happen is increased regulation, increased globalization of the supply chain, which guaranteed is going to hurt or wipe out the heartland manufacturing sector. And we're going to see lots of unemployment from that, particularly at the lower incomes, the poor and minority poor are going to suffer as a result of that. So to me, Trump wins on that one. Less war, less education, more jobs, better education. Better education. I don't know how we measure that under Trump necessarily. I think this boils down to school choice versus the unions. We know where the unions are going to end up. Where the unions are going to end up on Biden's scale. They're going to be supported. And, to me, teachers' unions love teachers. Love the teachers. Hard job should be valued way more than it is. But the union itself, you want to look for systemic racism. There it is in America. It's in the keeping education, quality education and choice away from minority families, from poor families, and schools that are just unacceptable. I mean, I think you can't argue that with anybody. You could argue that school choice is going to solve that problem, but you can't argue that minorities and the poor are getting a good education, because it's just a fact that they are not. And so so where was I? Less war, less terrorism, more jobs, better education. Those are all things that I liked about the last 4 years. And I completely understand the people that hate Trump, some of whom are let's say most or all of my close friends are never Trumpers. They hate him. And what they value are different things. They value civility. They value tone. They value anti-bullying, if I can put it that way. And I just have to be honest, that stuff never bothered me. I never took it seriously. It's kind of funny if you can have a different attitude about it. And maybe that's because I spend my world in business in hostile environments where people are screaming at you and calling your names, and like I just have to suck that up. So maybe that's one of the reasons it has never bothered me. And I completely respect and empathize with with those that prioritize that over the other things. But understand your choice. When you choose Biden over Trump, you're choosing civility, tone over war, over terrorism, less war, less terrorism, over jobs for the poor. It's just a bad trade for me. It's just a bad trade for me. And honestly, I don't think any one of my friends would acknowledge that that's the trade, by the way. I don't think they sit there and they think, hey, I'm happy to go to war if I could have better civility and tone domestically. That's not what they're thinking, but they will. They will be thinking that if their cognitive bias doesn't kick in, because that is the trade. That's the trade, and it's objective and it's measurable, and that's just where we are. So less war, less terrorism, more jobs, better education, healthcare is my fifth priority. And by healthcare, I break that into two categories. One would be the healthcare system itself, and then the COVID response. So both of those loosely fall under healthcare. I think the Trump administration was a fail on both of those fronts. Will the Biden administration do better? I think the Biden administration is going to be incompetent, so I doubt it, but they're not going to do worse. And they're probably going to make the public feel like they're doing a better job than Trump did. I think Trump flat out failed on the healthcare system. I like the lowering the drugs, obviously, but never was there a comprehensive plan to deal with the healthcare in the U.S., which is horribly corrupt. Actually, I'm going to tell you a funny story about that in a second. Overly expensive, and people aren't getting the care they need. And on the COVID side, I mean, who knows? How do you evaluate objectively and measurably how Trump did in that? I mean, you can look at deaths, but you can't compare deaths to other countries. That's not an apples to apples comparison. It's not a univariable analysis. Anybody that does that is just stupid and doesn't know how to compare data. But for sure, where he failed was in the COVID messaging. And we talked before on this show about pace and lead, how to message COVID better, about empathy, which is going to be a big topic that I'm going to talk about in a second here. But if Trump had recognized that the entire world, including all of America, was freaked out about COVID in late February, March, April, May, June, and rather than the instinct of a businessman in times that are good, the instinct is to underplay that and focus on the positive. Yeah, it's no big deal. It's kind of like the flu. It's kind of like the cold. We got lots of drugs for this. We're gonna have some shots for it. A vaccine. That's the word I'm looking for. We're gonna have some vaccine any moment, rather than downplaying it and expecting the American population to hear that, process it with their paradigm, with their prejudice, their confirmation bias of fear. That's not gonna work. All the public's gonna do is say, this guy's out to lunch, he's not handling this properly, we need different leadership, which is exactly what happened, okay? Instead of saying that, if Trump had gone to the public and say, as I've said on this show before, said, look, this is a horrible disease. We've never seen anything in our lifetimes that have transmitted so easily. The consequences are severe. People with comorbidities, people over a certain age, the vulnerable, the death rates are way higher and scary. And this may be worse than you are even fearing right now, public. This is a bad situation. We are in trouble. Here's what we're going to do about it. Here's what we're going to do about it. I put together Operation whatever it was. I want to say Grand Slam, but I think that's from a Bond movie. Operation something to get the vaccines out quickly. We're working on therapeutics. We're talking to the states about how they manage their elderly and home care facilities. right? We're doing all these things. You know, we brought a naval ship and turned it into a COVID hospital in the ports around Manhattan. All these things that were done, but nobody got to understand it because you lost them immediately when you underplayed the risk of this thing. A turnaround leader, a true leader who deals with crisis, would have gone the other way. It's called pacing and leading in persuasion. It's empathy. It's understanding the fears of who you're talking to first, gaining their trust with reality and authentic discussion, and then providing a solution. People would have been much happier. He would have done the exact same things in reality, but the messaging would have made him a hero if people were willing to listen, which of course is a problem with the mainstream media, as they like to say. But that would have turned him into a hero, and so that's just a failure. That's on Trump. That's on Trump. I mean, he's a promoter. We all know that. He's a promoter. He's a salesman, and he's not a turnaround leader. And their initial instinct of that personality is not to say, "Hey, we're in trouble." The initial instinct is to say, "I got this, and we're not in trouble, and it's no big deal," which is the wrong thing to do. So he was wrong on that, and Biden will be better on that. There's no doubt in my mind Biden's going to give more comfort. In fact, that's why he won the election. I think he won the election primarily on healthcare and civility, and COVID in particular. When I say healthcare, I promised you a story about corruption that in the healthcare system. It's just amazing to me. So I'm not going to disclose any personal stuff here, but I know somebody in the U.S. who recently went for a procedure at a hospital, had to have an operation, sort of a 2-day affair, and there was 3 or 4 visits beforehand to prep for this. And so this person went in for their operation. Don't hold me to the numbers, by the way, I'm going to get this wrong. The person went in for but it's close enough. The person went in for the operation, and the day before they had to talk to the administration of the hospital, and the hospital people said, okay, this is going to be $38,000. That's what this is going to cost. And give us your insurance. We bill it to your insurance company. And so give us that information. And what this person said was, we don't have insurance. We'll just pay you cash, right? We have no other choice. We don't have insurance. We'll just have to pay you for this. I don't mean cash and bills, but we will pay you out of our pocket for this. So the hospital said, oh, well, we have discounts for people that are not going through insurance. So then they started talking about payment terms. How long do you need to pay it off? And there'll be a different price for that. And then this person said, no, we'll just put it on the credit card, like right now. And the hospital said, oh, okay, well, we have a discount for that too. And so how much was this $38,000 procedure if you were just to pay for it on your credit card today? And again, I got the numbers wrong, but close enough. The answer was $2,500. The procedure dropped from $38,000 to $2,500 because you're not going through the insurance company. Let me ask you a question. What do you think the hospital's cost was on that procedure? Do you think it was $2,500 or do you think it was $38,000? Assume there's a profit in there. So when I say cost plus profit margin, do you think it was the $2,500 they were willing to take? Or do you think it was the $38,000 that they were going to bill the insurance company? That is the waste in the American healthcare system, maybe the Canadian healthcare system too, probably, right? I don't know. But what a shocking example. If you put it through insurance, it's 15 times more expensive than if you just paid for it, which we need to assume is we just know for a fact that the $2,500 in that example ought to be the real price. That just needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed. Just do the math on that through 350 odd million people. My God, it's just billions and billions and billions of dollars. Is that fraud or waste or what is that? I just think it's corruption. It's legal corruption in my mind. I'm no expert on it. I'm not pointing fingers, but there's your problem with the healthcare system right there. All right, as I said, those are I don't know how things are going to go. I wish Biden-Harris administration best of luck. I hope America prospers, and I hope there's no wars. I hope there's no terrorism. I hope there's more jobs for the poor and the dignity of those jobs. I hope there's better health care. I hope those are my priorities, and I hope the Biden administration knocks it out of the park on those. I don't see any evidence, but I'm an optimist. I tell you to think positive. I'm going to do that. Let's talk about empathy. I was listening to Scott Adams, one of my favorite people. I've talked to you before. I don't know the guy. My favorite people in terms of social media and podcasting and his education about that he provides about persuasion. And he was talking about empathy and that he's all about politics as a backdrop for how he teaches persuasion skills. And he says, Biden has positioned himself as being full of empathy to differentiate from Trump, who is not full of empathy, who doesn't have empathy. And his argument is that, and by the way, when he says empathy, he's using the word wrong. I find myself every time I disagree with Scott Adams, it's a definitional issue. And when I say he's using the word wrong, he does a podcast for an hour every single day. All right. You're not going to be precise in your language when you're putting, like on Christmas, on his honeymoon, he's putting out podcasts every single day for about an hour. God bless him. And you're going to get things wrong or imprecise, and it's no big deal. So I don't say it as a criticism, but in this context, when he's in this story, when he's talking about empathy, he means it's the wrong word. He's really talking about caring. Biden cares and Trump doesn't care is basically the positioning, he says, is the positioning of the Biden camp, which I think is probably true. And then he said, do you really need empathy? Do you need empathy as a leader? And he says, no. He says, in fact, you want your leader to not have empathy because they need to make the tough decisions. And so again, I think this is a definitional issue, but Scott is dead wrong on this. You need to be a leader of your business. You need to be a leader of your career. You need to be a leader of your world, of your life. And to be effective, empathy is right up there, way up there on the skills and the attributes that you need to do that. To succeed in a turnaround of a business, to make more money, you need to persuade. How do you affect change in an organization? You need to persuade. You need to persuade internally, your employees, and you need to and yourself. You need to persuade externally, which are your stakeholders, your bankers, your customers, your supply chain, all those sorts of things. And so if you can't persuade, you're not going to succeed. Well, what do you need for persuasion? Well, the first thing you need is attention. Okay, you can't persuade people when they're not paying attention to you. That's really difficult in the social media world if you want to change the world and you're trying to get people, you got 3 followers or 37 followers like I do on Twitter because I don't pay attention to that account very often. You don't have attention, you're not going to succeed, right? And that was a brilliance of Trump, because people say, well, he shouldn't have tweeted the things that he tweets. We hate his tweets. That's not appropriate. It's not civil. It's not, normal discourse. We can't normalize that. But he wouldn't have been president without that, because how would he have had the attention? If he didn't get people to listen to him, if he was just some schmuck coming down the escalator and didn't say something controversial, that would have been the end of it, right? He would have lost to Sleepy Jeb or whatever their names were. So Slow Jeb, what was his name? I don't recall. Anyways, attention, that's number one. Number two is you need to gain the trust of the people. You need to pace and lead. And how do you, we talked about pace and leading when I gave you the COVID example of the messaging that needed to be done up front, which spoke to what the people are already feeling. How do you know what the people are already feeling? That's empathy, okay? That's understanding. And that's what the word empathy means, by the way. It doesn't mean caring. You don't have to care. I mean, you might want to care to be a good person, but that's what empathy is. Empathy is about understanding the emotional state of the people that you're trying to persuade. And so lots of people, I find, empathy is a big word these days, big in the sense that everybody's throwing it around, all the gurus and the life coaches and all those people that are advisors talk about empathy. I know Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a great social media presence, he had a wine brand called Empathy. That was the label on it. But I think a lot of these people, or most of them, actually use the word wrong. They confuse it for caring. They confuse it for sympathy. They confuse it for rolling over. No, 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 we need to give you what you need. But that's not what empathy is. Empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference. That is the capacity to place yourself in another person's position. Think of it simply as walking a mile in their shoes. You need to understand where they're coming from. And that's what's wrong with Scott's analysis of Biden versus Trump. Do you think Biden has empathy in terms of understanding of the other side? When he says to 75 million voters of Trump that you're all like Hitler, and not just him, by the way, I'm including in him his party, right? The senators, the congresspeople on the Democratic side, the news media, which is on the Democratic side, the AOCs of the world. When you call people racists and bigots and misogynists and sexists and yada yada, all of those things, and then ask for unity, are you understanding? Do you have empathy for the other people? I don't think so. I don't think you do. And when it comes to tough decision making as a leader, if you don't have empathy, which was Scott's proposition, you want somebody without empathy and then they can make the hard decisions. If you don't have an understanding for how your decision negatively impacts the counterparty, how is it a hard decision? Sounds like an easy decision to me. If you're just completely oblivious to how the other person may react or feel about that, that's not a hard decision. A hard decision is when you have to do A, but you know that A, rather than B, A is going to really hurt this block of people over here. But it's still the right thing to do because you've looked at the risks and rewards. You've looked at, the varying blocks of people, and you've had empathy and you understood that. That's a hard decision, okay? That's a hard decision. And I think Trump blew that on the COVID thing. I think he didn't understand where the American public was at in their fear. But, his whole brand is about negotiation. Okay? You can't negotiate without empathy. So maybe they both have empathy. Maybe you have empathy in your comfort zone as a leader, right? Maybe you have empathy in the things you understand. Maybe when Trump is negotiating a trade deal, he has empathy. He understands what they want. He understands his power, and he uses his power and gets the deal done, or not, right? But heads us in the right direction. Take the North Korean negotiation, for example. I mean, to me, when Trump walked in, Obama told him the biggest risk by far was North Korea, and we were on the verge of nuclear war in the Korean Peninsula, and there was no win. It was just going to be horrible. 4 years later, that hasn't happened, and you saw so much, let's call it sucking up, let's call it what it was, sucking up by the US president, by Trump, on you can build some hotels, you can get rich, you can have a great life, look how beautiful your landscape is. You remember all that stuff that he got criticized for? Where do you think that came from? Do you think that came from some sort of profit motive? I mean, that's just ridiculous. That came from empathy. That came from understanding. Empathy is a tool. That came from understanding what the leader of North Korea was really looking for. He was looking for respect on a world stage, and he got it temporarily. He's looking for a better life for him, maybe his family, probably not his people, but at least for him, right? He can be rich, he can build this stuff. That's what all that is for. Now, you can disagree with it. I don't have any problem. You could just say, hey, he shouldn't be talking to a dictator who murders a bunch of people. Cool, okay, that's your view. I'm just demonstrating for you the use of empathy in a negotiation. I've been reading a book, I started a book months and months and months ago by Chris Voss called, I think it's called Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss was the worldwide lead FBI negotiator for hostage taking and bank hostages, terrorist hostages, all that sort of stuff. So really a worldwide leader in negotiation skills. And I love the title of the book, Never Split the Difference, because the premise there is you've got a bank robbery and they took 20 hostages. What are you going to do? Are you going to leave them with 10 hostages? Are you going to split that difference? You can't do that, right? You need to get all 20 hostages out. There is no splitting the difference. Never Split the Difference. It's a cool book. You should pick it up and go through it. And he focuses very early on empathy. And he says, empathy does not require people to have a sympathy for another plight. You don't need to sympathize. You don't need to feel their pain. And nor is empathy about being nice. That's not what empathy is. Empathizing with someone, therefore, does not mean agreeing with them or even necessarily liking the other side. Tactical empathy, which is using empathy as a tool, he says, is the process of knowingly and intentionally influencing, persuading your counterpart's emotions to make a deal. A lot of the time, people just want to be understood, particularly hostile people. They just want to be heard and understood. He tells stories in the books, or maybe it's on his podcast, I don't recall, about dealing with terrorists where they took a hostage and they want $30 million. I made up that number, but some really big number. And he goes through a process of just understanding, for the last, this was a Muslim situation, for the last, 1,000 years or whatever it is, how they feel that they've been treated as second-class citizens, not respected. And he just kept asking questions. He said, hey, you feel this way. And the goal is not to get yes in a negotiation. The goal is to get the counterparty to say, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what's going on. That's how I feel about it. And when he gets that, they just walked away from their demands. They literally just walked away from their demands, $0, got the hostages, because all they really wanted was to be understood. That applies in a business setting. It doesn't work 100% all the time, but you cannot negotiate, influence, persuade if you don't have empathy. Chris Voss will tell you that revenue comes from relationships, right? You generate revenue with people that you have a relationship with. Relationships come from empathy. They come from a common understanding, from respecting that person's point of view and working together on whatever the issues are. Bottom line, you can't negotiate without empathy. And I think we're 30 minutes in, so that's enough about talking about empathy. Let's move on to planning. Cheers again, by the way. Holler or swaller. I've talked a lot on this show, including some interviews with entrepreneurs about business plans, how plans, the value of a plan is the idea of going through the thought process, right? What about this? What about that? You go through the thought process, but every business plan is useless in terms of a measurement tool, in terms of picking out, okay, what am I doing? Oh yeah, there's my business plan. That's not what business plans are for. I think somewhere I've quoted the Mike Tyson quote of, which was taken from and amended from Dwight Eisenhower, as I recall. But regardless, the Tyson quote about everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. I mean, plans just go to crap immediately. And we've talked about that a lot in the show, and we'll continue to talk about it because it's a major issue. So the trick in any complicated situation is, as we've talked about before, is you need to set directions. I've talked about this feeling of being lost in the forest when you're running a business that's in trouble. You're not making enough money. You're sitting in a dark forest. You have no idea how to get back to your car. You got to pick a direction, right? If you have nothing else to go on, you got to pick a direction, and you need to go with it until it stops feeling right. And then you need to come back, and now you have you got one less choice, right? You had 4 choices: north, south, east, west, and north, south, east, west. And now you just got rid of north because you went that way and it didn't work out. Was that a waste of time? No, because now you only have 3 choices left. You have to just choose a direction, right? You go with your gut feel. You have to have your priorities. What's important to you, right? And then you need to focus on execution, because it's execution, not strategy, that wins 100% of the time. You can have the best business plan, you can have the best idea. If you don't act on it, if you don't execute, it's useless. There's a reason people like me, Gary Vee, not trying to equate myself to him, but there's a reason that people like us just give our content away for free, right? I will tell you for free my thoughts. And it's the same content that other people would pay me $1 million in advisory fees or more to help them execute on the advice that I'm giving you right now. I don't mind giving it to you because 99% of people don't execute. I've met one person in my life who presented their problem to me. I remember this fellow specifically in manufacturing in Windsor, Ontario, years ago, and he called me in and he had a very complicated problem, and I listened to it and I said, here's the general direction of what you can do. And he said, thank you, I'll get back to you, which he never did. I called him about 3 months later. I said, hey, whatever happened to you? And he said, yeah, you were right. I executed that plan and we're great. I was like, cool. Didn't pay me, but cool, right? But he's the only person in my life I ever met that actually executed. So there was a tweet this morning from Anna Cabrera, CNN journalist. I think that Anna reminds me of Pooh Bear a little bit in the sense that she's a journalist with very little brain, much like Pooh Bear was a bear with very little brain. No one's accused her of being the sharpest knife in the drawer, so to speak. So her tweet was, Joe Biden, breaking news. Joe Biden and his advisors are inheriting no coronavirus vaccine distribution plan to speak of from the Trump administration. Sources tell CNN, there is nothing for us to rework. We are going to have to build everything from scratch, one source said. Joe Biden and his advisors are inheriting no coronavirus vaccine distribution plan to speak of from Trump. There's nothing for us to rework. We are going to have to build everything from scratch. Okay, so there's the anonymous source from, as reported by CNN. Based on their history the last 4 years or even longer, you can decide whether that's true information when coming from an anonymous source. But regardless, I retweeted, or sorry, it's not, I replied to her and I said, if this is true, which is doubtful, it seems about 30 minutes of work to me. I can do it for them after my coffee if that helps. Okay, I got a lot of likes on that, by the way. I've been having fun with this stuff. So this morning I sat down after my tweeting and after my coffee was finished, and just bear with me 1 second. I see that my earphones are dying, so I'm going to take one off and plug the other in. All right, recharging. Hope that still works. I don't know why that happened. They were fully charged before I started the show. So I sat down this morning after my coffee and I was thinking about what I'm going to talk about today, and I created my plan for vaccine distribution if I was the federal government. Here's my plan. Determine the number of vaccine shots, if that's the way they quantify units, whatever it is, available to me now, and then each week for the next 3 months, right? As I'm buying these things and as the companies are producing these units. At the same time, get from the states the number of individuals that are in vulnerable categories. Okay, vulnerable categories. I have a tough time with that word. Apparently, maybe it's the martini. Cheers again. Get the number from each state. How many do you have in these categories? Define for them what those categories are. Number 1, frontline workers. Number 2, people with the following comorbidities. Number 3, people over 60 in your population. Get that number by category from the state. Number 3, send vaccines to the states for them to distribute. Send it to them pro rata based on the number of people that fell into those 3 categories. And you do it on the condition, signed up front, that the states distribute those vaccines to those target categories first, and to nothing else. Okay, to those target categories, and then you monitor it daily. You have the states come back, give you reports on how they're distributing, do it daily, and then every week sit down and revise that 3-month plan, because I remember I started with how many units I'm going to have available to me today, next week, the week after that, and you do it for three months or so, which turns out to be a 13-week plan, which is basically a 13-week similar to a 13-week cash flow in the business world. Okay, there's my plan. Now, is that plan a good plan? Probably not. I'm not even American. I don't know how the system works, all right? But it's a plan, and here's the important part. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a good plan. The importance of that plan is you started with something, you set some priorities, you came up with a system, and then you monitor it daily and you amend as you need to amend. Now, I sat down without thinking about that in advance, and I timed myself, and I came up with that plan in 6 minutes. Didn't take me 30 minutes, took me 6 minutes. And you know what you could do with that plan? You could stand in front of the American people and you could communicate that plan simply, easily, and people would understand it. We've got so many units, we're getting so many each week. We've identified these 3 categories as our target categories first, and we're sending them out to the states who are the ones that are responsible for distribution, or we're asking them to be responsible for distribution. We're monitoring it daily, and we can update you once a week with how we're doing, and if we need to make changes to that plan that was just outlined. Took me 6 minutes. Took me 6 minutes. It was easy, and you can communicate it, and it will be effective. It does not matter if it's a good plan. Everything you do in your business can be done exactly that way, no matter how complex it is. No matter how complex it is. You're lost, you're not sure which way to go, pick a direction, build the system, don't overthink it. How would you overthink my plan? Well, you would say, are those the right 3 categories? Maybe comorbidity should become before frontline workers. Maybe non-white people who have a higher death rate, I'm told, should get it before white people. I don't know, right? I don't know. But the point is, nobody knows. Like, everybody you talk to will have a different opinion on that. You got to start somewhere. I don't care where you start. That was my 3 categories. Change it every day if things aren't going. Evaluate it every day and change it when things aren't going the way it ought to be going. Okay? If anyone tells you in government, in business, in your regular life, that they can't act, that they can't move forward because they don't have a plan, that person has no idea what they're doing, and they're not a leader. When you're a government person, you're an anonymous source, assuming one exists, for the CNN journalist, tells you that there's no plan, that they inherited, and oh my God, we're gonna have to create one from scratch. The proper response, the follow-up question from Anna Cabrera should have been, you could have that plan before I've done this interview. You want to take 5 minutes and do it right now? Let's get moving. What are your priorities? That should have been the response. All right. What's my third topic? Look, I know I'm talking about politics, so I hope I'm not offending too many people. But I think there's good business lessons here. And again, we're just having fun, and we wish the new administration well. Let's talk about election integrity. This will be the one that gets me deplatformed. So I'm going to have another drink first with you. Do you think the election was fair? Do you think it was fraudulent? If 55%, which is the stat that I've seen on recent polls, think that the election was a fraud, does it matter if the election was not a fraud? If in reality, as all of the Democrats in power would say, and now what people call the mainstream Republicans, if they all say the election was great, does it matter? If 55% of the public thinks it wasn't great and that it was fraudulent, what does it matter what the reality is? The problem is not the reality. The problem is not that. The problem is the perception of 55% of the population. If you know, do you think, let me ask you a question the other way around. Do you think that voting machines that were used for this election can be hacked? Can they be hacked or manipulated? I mean, we watched a techie guy during a hearing on TV hack into the voting system, right? We watched him do that. He said, yeah, I actually, not only is it hackable, I'm in it right now. I'm literally hacked in to the software right now. Is it possible that the voting software used is the only software on the face of the earth that is immune to hacking? Is that possible? Do you think that's a possible thing? Is it the only software on the face of the earth that would be immune to hacking? Probably not, right? Do you think there's other ways to manipulate an election? Like, is the American history on elections bulletproof? Has there never been fraud? Would it be possible, for example, to simply throw away all of the ballots received from a zip code known to be favorable to one candidate or the other? Is that a possible thing to do? Probably, right? I mean, you can answer your own questions, but it would seem to me, if you were being objective about whether it's possible, just possible, not saying it was, but is it possible to manipulate or fraudulently skew election results? I think you got to say probably. I think you got to say yes, right? You just have to. And so there's means. There's means to have a fraudulent election. Is there motive? What would be the motive in this particular election between Biden and Trump? What would be the motives? Were the stakes high? Like, let me ask, so was this a normal election? Or would you think that if you've convinced the public for 4 years that the incumbent, that President Trump was basically Hitler, and was going to destroy your life and your family. If you convinced them that for 4 years, what is the proper reaction of the public to having been convinced of that? If you think your leader is Hitler, is a Nazi, is a racist, is going to destroy you and your family, should you hold back on trying to get rid of him? Or should you do everything in your power to get rid of him? This is the old story about if you'd known Hitler back in the day, would you have shot him, right? Well, if you've convinced people for 4 years, do you think they have motive to skew the election? Is that possible? Not saying they did. No evidence of that. And I'm not saying there is no evidence of that. I'm saying I don't have any evidence of that. I have no idea. I'm just thinking you could. It's possible, right? There's means. Lots of motive. Very serious election. Lots of motive. I mean, and opportunity, we don't even need to talk about opportunity, right? I mean, there's software that you could hack. There's ballots that people could throw out. There's plenty of opportunity. You've got means, motives of opportunity. You know what else you have? You have no consequences. I mean, we all know there's been election fraud in the past. We know the odd person got slapped on the wrist, but has there ever been any serious consequences for election fraud? I can't think of any. I'm not saying there's not. I just don't think of any cases. If you're sitting in Georgia, Philadelphia, and you have an opportunity, means, and motive to do some shenanigans, are you worried about the risk of that? I mean, you don't want to get caught, but are you really worried about the risk of that? Do you think you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail? Or do you think, wow, I got this Hitler guy, and I got an opportunity to impact that, and I don't even really understand what the consequences of this are. They might be something, but they're not going to be horrendous, right? So you got means, motive, opportunity, no consequences. Was there election fraud? Let me ask you a question. Why wouldn't there be election fraud? Have you thought about that? Why would there not be? Give me an argument for that. Is it because Democrats and Republicans both? By the way, I don't think this could just have to be Democrats. It could be Republicans. Do you think that they're all so high in integrity that this could never happen? Is that your view? Now, I'm not arguing that Biden should not be president. I've said from day one, he won the election. Whether it was real or not, it doesn't really matter because there's nothing you could do about it in the constitutional system, right? You had your legal challenges, and he won. He got more votes. Whether they legit or not doesn't really matter. He got the most votes. That's the system. We have however, I'm a professional. And I don't just mean a professional leader, turnaround management, change agent. Like I'm actually a chartered accountant in the U.S. would be called a CPA. I have a professional body that I have to answer to. And one of the things that we're drilled in from youngins, drilled into our head from youngins, when you're in a professional body like the accountants, is that you can't have conflict, right? You can't be conflicted between this client and your personal interests, or this client and that client. You have to avoid conflict. But it's not just the conflict, it's the appearance of conflict. It is the appearance of conflict that is the important thing. It's obvious you shouldn't be conflicted, but you need to do everything you can to not appear conflicted. Why? Because integrity is everything when you're a professional in your professional body. Integrity is everything. The fact of conflict doesn't matter. It's the appearance that kills you, okay? And when it comes, if you apply that to the voting, if you apply that to the integrity of the election, It's just the appearance. It's the possibility that this happened when 55% of US voters think there was something wrong with the election. And if the Democrats, if the Biden administration had some empathy, had some understanding, what would they do about that? Would they apologize? No, shouldn't do that. Would they say we're not legit? Nope, shouldn't do that. What would they say is, we hear you. We understand you. I don't think there's any evidence of election fraud. I don't think there's any evidence, but I understand it appears that way to you. I understand there's concerns. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to reform the system, okay? And we're going to set up a commission to do that. And we're going to focus on transparency, because we know that in this election, there was lots of transparency rules that were turned around and overlooked. It was just because of COVID. It was just because of COVID. But what we're going to do going forward is they're going to be in stone, and transparency in our elections is paramount, because we don't want you Americans worrying about the integrity of our elections. That's what he should do. If he had empathy, I'm not going to hold my breath. I don't think that's going to happen. In business, in negotiation, you need to maintain the. Not only do you need to have integrity, you need to obtain. You need to retain the appearance of integrity. Struggled to get that out. Let me tell you just one last little story about something that changed for me in my life. I remember specifically when this happened. So I went through probably into my 40s in my career. It was going great. I'm making lots of money. I'm a success by anybody's standard, and that's great. And I'm in Florida, and I'm with a bunch of my buddies. We're on a golf trip, and something just hit me. It just hit me, and I thought to myself, I am going to go forward the rest of my life ruthlessly adhering to the truth and accuracy, okay? I'm never going to spin anything again. Now, that's not to say that I was untruthful or dishonest for the first part of my career. I was always honest. I was always truthful, but when you're younger, you're full of enthusiasm. You're trying to sell, you feel like you need to spin, enhance the positive, right? Avoid the negative. And I said, I just said I'm going to stop doing that. In everything in my life, I'm just going to be dead on truthful and honest, because it's easier, and let's see what that does for me. And I started right then and there with my golf game. I stopped changing my lie. I counted every single stroke. I wasn't giving myself a mulligan. If I shot 120 instead of 88, I scored 120. I wasn't, and I was always pretty honest about my score, but I became just relentlessly honest about my score. And I will tell you that my career has gone up 20-fold since I did that, since I made that change. Because what happens is I found, and I was doing this for me, but what I found is the appearance, the view, the perception of the outside world is that you are relentlessly honest. You'll have tons of integrity. You're not going to lie. You have people's back, and it will work for you. It will change your life. It will change your business. There's a lesson to draw from all of this. We're 53 minutes in. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for listening. If you like it, please subscribe. We're done with politics. I'll try not to talk about politics again for another year or so, if possible. Thanks again for tolerating, and I appreciate you all very much. Bye.